Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Weekly Hope, number one of two this week. It's Kirsten and Elsa, my unofficial co-host for the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. We've got our guest over there, but just me for now until I introduce her. It's a joy to welcome you here. I'm Kirsten Hagland, and it is a real blessing for me to be able to host this show every week. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you are a returning visitor, welcome back. So what we do here at Weekly Hope is we like to bring on clinicians, experts, professionals, advocates, speakers, authors, people with their own recovery stories, you name it. We like to bring them onto the show to talk to them about their insight, their area of expertise, maybe hear their recovery story, among other things, and also have them here to be able to answer your questions. So what we like to do is provide information and also give you an opportunity to ask questions and to share your thoughts and your stories. So that's what Weekly Hope is all about. If you're joining us for the first time, especially, please leave a comment, tell us your name, let us know where you're signing in from. Make sure to say hello to us, and we would absolutely love to hear from you. And of course, if you're joining us back again for maybe the second, third, fourth time, fifth time, if you're a returning visitor or viewer, please let us know again as well. We love to see those returning friends. You're all a part of the Eating Disorder Hope family, and we absolutely love to hear from you. So throughout the broadcast, make sure that you make your comments and questions known, and we'll get to them. So we have an extremely cool and also interestingly difficult conversation to have today. And I say difficult because, as we'll discuss with our guests, this is a concept, self-worth and identity, that seems on its face to be very logical, very practical, very intuitive, but especially for people in recovery from an eating disorder, it's often not, and is a very crucial but very difficult part of the recovery process. So I really can't wait to dive into it with our guest. So without further ado, I am going to introduce her. So we are welcoming Camille Williams, and hold on, I'm going to read her bio for you so you know all about her. So Camille is the Eating Disorder Program Coordinator at Timberline Knolls Residential Treatment Center, which is located outside of Chicago, Illinois. As Eating Disorder Program Coordinator, she supports the development of curriculum, supervises the eating disorder specialists, and also provides group therapy. She also educates and trains all staff on campus and advocates for eating disorder awareness through publications. Camille started at TK as a behavioral health specialist, then transitioned into the eating disorder specialist role, and was in that position for nearly 5 years, developing her skills and competence working with the eating disorder population. Camille received a Bachelor of Arts degree in both psychology and sociology from Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. She then went on to earn a Master of Arts in Clinical Professional Psychology from Roosevelt, Illinois. So that's a little bit about Camille, and she's just super cool, which you'll all get to see. All right, so here is Camille. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Kirsten.
Hey, so everyone here who's watched the show before knows Elsa and knows how much of a dork I am about my dog. But you said that your dog is not there with you because she maybe would bark at us, which I wouldn't mind. But you do kind of have your dog with you. Can you show everyone your little girl?
Here's Lila.
Oh, and it says, did you get that pillow made?
Yeah, my mom made it for me. So it says love on the side.
I love it. So Lila's with us in spirit, and Elsa just always sleeps through these conversations. She's pretty much by the end of the thing, she's just totally asleep. So anyway, well, maybe Lila, maybe next time you're on, you'll have to bring Lila. She can bark happily at us all. So, all right. So Camille, first of all, why don't you, before we dive into our conversation about self-worth and identity, why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do specifically day to day at Timberline Knolls?
Yeah, absolutely. So the majority of my work is typically running different types of groups with the residents that we have on campus, eating disorder groups that might be psychoeducational, and then a lot of groups on self-image and body image. So that's why I'm really excited to talk about this topic, because it's something I talk about with my residents all the time. And then I also supervise the eating disorder specialist team. So I help them to also run more groups around campus. So our role is really to just bring education awareness to campus, as well as just help the residents in their recovery process, which is really challenging.
Yeah, and also, can you talk a little bit about, and this is something that I've experienced because I've been to TK campus many, many times, and it's gorgeous and awesome and super positive and amazing. But can you talk a little bit about, because people, I mean, obviously women, whether they're young women, girls, adolescents, whatever the age may be, they're separated according to age for obvious reasons. But girls and women that come there struggle with a lot of different things, whether it's an eating disorder or a co-occurring disorder, trauma, underlying trauma, substance abuse, etc. How are the groups broken up? And I don't think am I right in saying this, that like all the eating disorder track people stay together, and the substance abuse people stay together, the trauma groups stay together? It's not like that, right?
Right. Yeah. It's, we do have some groups that all residents will receive. So like self-image is considered a core group. So everybody who comes to campus is going to get self-image, because regardless of if you have an eating disorder or if you struggle with another addiction, substance, a process addiction, if you have trauma, if you have a mood disorder, all of that mental health stuff is going to affect how you see yourself and how you think about yourself. So self-image is a group that everybody who comes to our campus is going to receive. But then we also have groups like our eating disorder group. Not everybody is going to be at TK or Timberline Knolls for an eating disorder. So we break that down a little bit more into different diagnoses. So those are what we call our elective groups. So residents work with their treatment team to decide which of those elective groups is the best fit for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just thought that was a really cool point to make, especially given the topic area, because self-worth and developing a sense of, positive sense of self-image is something that literally everyone can work on at any point in their lives. It doesn't matter if they are struggling with an eating disorder or something else, or not dealing with a mental health issue at all. I feel like our self-image and our sense of self-worth is under attack constantly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I see we've got some new viewers. Hey, everyone. Just want to welcome you here and let you know, or ask you if you feel comfortable to say hello in the comments. Tell us your name and where you're signing in from. And oh, there we go. Oh, no, we got lots of hellos. Hey, everyone. We've got Denise back here. Hey, Denise. Hey, Kathleen, Mary, Lindsay. Good to see you guys. And another Mary as well, Mary Olson. Wonderful to see you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so self-worth. Let's talk about it. What exactly is self-worth? Can you give us a basic definition?
Yeah, I think like you explained, it's easy to define. Like if we look at the two parts, we have self, so me, who I am, and then worth, so worth or value. So it's really broken down into my worth or my value, which seems like it would be really simple, and it's totally not. Because it gets so messy, because we tend to not define our own worth. We let others or society tell us who we should be or what our value or worth should be. And so I think that's where it really starts to get complicated and messy, because we're not going by my own definition of self-worth. What is important or valuable to me? Yeah. I get caught up in what society wants me to be or what my family wants me to be. And maybe I want something different for myself.
Yeah. Just want to briefly mention here, Lindsay says, hey, I'm in North Carolina and an alumni. Woohoo! Hey, Lindsay. Great to see you here. Jane also says hi from Gainesville, Virginia. Hi, Jane. So, yeah. So what age does this start, would you say? Because it seems like when we're very, very young, we know exactly what we want. And obviously, it's not always the right thing. Right? It's not always like the good or healthiest or best thing for us. But when we're young, we seem to at least have some kind of sense of self-worth or confidence. But that really does start to change. How does that start to change in a person, and around what age?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can really vary. I feel like a lot of the people that I work with at TK, honestly, an age I hear often is 6 years old. So I'm not sure, that seems really young to me. And I think a lot of times it's compounded by trauma. So I think obviously if trauma is going to start happening, somebody's self-image or self-worth is going to be affected, because now maybe I'm not sure why somebody in my life or somebody I know is possibly treating me the way that they're treating me, whether that's family, a peer, an outsider. So I think that messes with self-worth. And then I think it can really happen, obviously, anywhere in adolescence. I think that's when we tend to assume self-worth starts getting messy, is when we start wanting to impress our peers. And I think it certainly can be that way for some people. So I think when there's trauma involved, it can happen really young, like 5, 6. Otherwise, it's maybe more like in those early adolescent ages, like 10 to 14.
Yeah. And how does this interact with an eating disorder? So how can maybe a misplaced sense of self-worth or identity lead to the development of an eating disorder?
Yeah, so I think as somebody is trying to navigate, like, who am I? Who do I need to be to impress other people, to make other people like me, to feel like I fit in? I think an eating disorder can show up as a way of trying to provide a blueprint for that. So, okay, this is the path to take. Like, maybe a magazine told me that, like, oh, if I look like that person, then people will like me. Or my peers said that if I'm really good at this sport, then I'll be cool and I'll be picked for the kickball team. And so I think that's where an eating disorder can show up and say, well, hey, here, I can provide you with a set of rules to follow. So I know a lot of people like how concrete an eating disorder can be, since it can be very number focused, whether it's the scale or calories. So it can be measurable, and it can be easy to set goals in an eating disorder. So then somebody can feel like, oh yeah, I am improving my self-worth. Like I did meet that like number goal that I set for myself. And I think unfortunately our society reinforces eating disorders. A lot of times if somebody is losing weight, they tend to get a lot of praise and recognition from other people. And so then that is obviously going to reinforce the behaviors or tell somebody, yeah, the identity you've chosen is a good one.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit though about how, I mean, I remember going through the exact same thing and having a very similar thought process in the development of my eating disorder, but then talk about how, I mean, because I was highly perfectionistic,
Mhm.
and as many people who struggle with eating disorders are, but it's a moving goalpost thing, because how you describe it is exactly how you think about it when you first start to engage in the behaviors or are earlier on in the disorder. But then you start to realize that those goalposts keep moving. Like
Yeah.
that worth that you thought you were going to achieve by getting to a certain number or certain calories or a certain number of compliments or whatever, it never quite satisfies. And so the goalposts keep moving further, and perfection keeps feeling further and further off. So it's this weird paradox of that you sought this out or started engaging these behaviors as in an effort to try to establish a sense of self-worth, but it's actually making you feel worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because I think perfection can also extend to lots of other areas of life. So not only do I have these goalposts in terms of my eating disorder or my relationship with food or my body, but it also extends to my relationships with others or the grades that I get in school. So now I'm building and building all this pressure to put on myself that I need to eat this and not that, but I also need to get straight A's. And if I get a B, that is the end of the world. It's absolutely terrible. And so an eating disorder really does limit somebody to have to be perfect. And I think all that pressure is really exhausting. And eventually people get to the place of seeing like, whoa, what I thought was a blueprint or a path for me has actually led me down this road of feeling miserable all the time and never feeling good enough or worthy, because I'm never going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm gonna get a B.
Yeah. What do you say to critics who, and I have to think about this a lot because, you and I and so many other people that work in this field can be in a bubble of sorts because we work with people all the time who understand these more sensitive things and these extremely complex questions of the self, and this kind of really, really hard work. But people on the outside, can hear conversations like this, or especially, you know, for a recovered individual, if they're talking to a family member or friend who doesn't know the lingo, so to speak, or this kind of vocabulary, and they might say something like, isn't this so self-centered, or isn't this so selfish, or can't you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get it together and just X, Y, Z, whatever their prescription or solution might be. How do we encourage society, or for people who are in recovery, in dealing with people that are being critical of this, that it's not just self-centered, it's not just selfishness. This is existential.
Right. And because really, when we look at it, an eating disorder is just about wanting to connect or belong. And I think the individual with an eating disorder is almost in a way trying to perfect themselves so that they will be acceptable to others. That's what it's all about. It's all about trying to get the acceptance or approval of others. So while the behaviors themselves or the perfectionism may seem self-centered or look self-centered, it's really all about how can I get you to approve me or you to think I'm acceptable and worthy. So it really is about fostering connection with others. Just to the person with the eating disorder, that means they have to fix themselves first before they can be worthy.
Yeah. And, you know, this is really interesting. We were talking last week with another guest about how, and of course, there's not one trait or one combination of traits which all people with eating disorders have, but she was talking about the fact that people who do struggle tend to be very, very sensitive people, empaths usually, people who don't necessarily have a super, super thick skin to start off with. You know, that's how that would be the colloquial way of saying it, I suppose. How can we, in the process of, and then we'll kind of transition here into that, having a low sense of self-worth, and then how do we develop that? How do you keep like a sense of sensitivity to how other people might feel, how other people are perceiving things or feeling, you know, that sense of sensitivity, but also like develop a little bit of a thicker skin?
Yeah, and I think that's where, kind of going back to the definition of self-worth, is really starting to look at the authentic self and can I define who I want to be rather than looking to others to define it, because then it's maybe going to be okay for me to say no to somebody. I don't always have to say yes just to feel like I'm giving somebody what they want and then they're going to accept me. So I think as we start to develop our own sense of worth, we can then be okay with others possibly not liking us or having something critical to say, because we have found our own, at least start of who we are, who we want to be, and feeling good in that, rather than disappointed that I let somebody down or somebody doesn't like me and I need to change that.
Yeah. I just want to say hello to Cynthia here. Cynthia is giving us a heart and says hello. Hi, Cynthia. And just want to say, I see we've got some new viewers too. Hello and welcome. We're having a discussion with Camille Williams here on self-worth and identity in recovery. And if you're just joining us, please say hello, leave your name in the comments. And of course, the floor is open to questions throughout. So if anytime you have something on your mind you want to ask Camille or you want to talk about, please just let us know. Okay, so that's the problem of self-worth and how it gets distorted. Now moving on to, okay, well, how do you develop a sense of self-worth? And this is the practical application is always the hardest part. That's why people go to treatment. Because to me it seems, and I think one of the most difficult things was when I think maybe, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, maybe like 3 years or so after like feeling in a very solid place in recovery and like feeling like on a real high. It was very difficult for me to remember that place of like real severe self-hatred. Like it was almost difficult to put myself back in that position. Like how did I ever feel that way? Because my mindset was so different. But there is like just an extreme amount of self-hatred that people in recovery feel. I have talked to so many people now and heard so many stories, so many more stories now that I can remember, and that part of my heart, I can relate to that and remember that now. But how do you even begin that process of helping someone to see that there is a possibility and a choice outside of just total, utter self-hatred?
Yeah, and I think that's a piece that I kind of sit with and am in with the residents all day, because they are, the people who come to residential are at the very early stages, so pretty severe in their eating disorder. And so that self-hatred is just really, really high then. So first is just to validate it, to allow them to talk about the shame that they feel or the hatred that they feel towards themselves. Because I think so often, we tend to try to, change somebody's mind. So I think the people I work with are used to having loved ones say like, no, but you really are great. You're so wonderful. You're so beautiful. And that kind of shuts off their feelings. So we want to allow them to express, this is why I don't like myself. I don't think I'm a good person. I don't think I'm worthy. I don't think I deserve anything. And that's really hard to sit with. I want to change their minds too. And it doesn't work. I can't change their minds. They have to decide that they want to change that. And it starts by allowing them just to have a voice to that self-hatred, because then I think I can start to explore, well, where's that narrative coming from? Where does that voice come from? Why are you such a terrible person? What makes you that way? What mistakes did you make that are that bad or that terrible? And the interesting thing is, when we get there, it tends to not be that bad. It's like, really, is that a mistake that you would forgive your friend for? Absolutely. So why are we still holding on to this as shame for you if it wouldn't be shame for anybody else? So I think that's a little bit of where to start.
That's so good. And I love that you talked about validating that feeling exists, because it is so hard. I think especially for parents. I mean, I'm not a parent, but my mom and I have talked about this in the past, where she would want to say and affirm just the way you just did, that say that other family members will tell them, no, you're a great person. No, I love you. No, you're beautiful. No, I do value you. And you can tell someone that all day long, but until they're ready to make until they feel validated and they're ready to make the choice to start doing that exploration, all that stuff is going to be in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Denise, I just want to say, I see your question, and we're actually going to get to that about identity post-eating disorder in just a few questions. So stick with us, and we're going to absolutely get to your question. I just want to hear, Cynthia has a great story about her daughter. And I just want to share this, Cynthia. This is a cool story, just to share it with our audience and to share it with Camille. She said, it was my daughter. It was traced to being scared of losing her mom to cancer when she was in grade 3. She lived with that fear, and we thought we all managed through the disease well. I wish that psychologists could have helped us through the cancer diagnosis with our daughter. She was in her first year engineering school on a full ride scholarship when her life came tumbling down, and luckily she shared with a friend her struggle, who encouraged her to tell us. She didn't want us to worry about her. She was bullied in high school and hid that as well. If I could go back in time, I'm not sure if we really could have prevented this part of her journey unless she herself understood what was troubling her. It took a team of experts to get her to open up. That's what an empath does. It's Cynthia, I'm so sorry that happened with your family, that you experienced that. But I'm really happy to hear, if I think I'm hearing correctly, that your daughter is with a treatment team or was able to work with a treatment team to be able to work on all of that. Is that something that you see as pretty common, Camille, that there are sometimes circumstances going on within a family that they can't necessarily control that lead a person to kind of shut down or internalize in that way?
Absolutely. And I think that's where it can feel like, okay, I don't have control over this medical issue or some family issue that's going on. And can I get really structured or really controlled in my life? So I'm going to manage my food. I'm going to manage my grades or my schooling, and I'm going to put all my focus and energy. So I think it's also a way to cope and avoid. So I don't want to feel what's going on with me or going on in my life. So I'm just going to try to focus on these things. And a lot of times that'll work for a while. And so then the person feels like, oh, this is good. Like I've got this all managed and under control. And the feelings will probably always resurface. And so then something else may happen in somebody's life. And then all that other feeling that has been building and shoved away by, okay, I'm just going to manage everything, tends to just resurface all at once and kind of crumbles that perfection that we were talking about. Like, did I have my life all organized and situated, and then did like a pin drop just crumble it all?
Yeah, absolutely. And Cynthia, thanks so much for sharing that. Lindsay, I see your question too. I'm going to get to it, but actually I'm going to go to Denise here. And this is moving into what I wanted to talk with you about next, and that's on building a sense of self-worth and identity, confronting the fact that you are in recovery and that identity is not going to be in your eating disorder anymore. Like, that can be terrifying. And, oh, not Denise, I'm sorry. Even though, hey, Denise, it was, it was Denise's question. When you've had an eating disorder for a long time, it's difficult to figure out who you will be without it. And that can be absolutely terrifying.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why people will waver sometimes in their recovery process, because the recovery identity and recovery itself is unknown and unfamiliar. And their eating disorder and their eating disorder identity, as miserable as it may be, is comfortable, is what they know, it's predictable. So I think recovery is really scary in that phase where I don't know who I am or who I'm going to be, and I've got to try to change something or do something different.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to define who you want to be. I work with a lot of people who want that answer right now. Like, okay, Camille, I'm giving up my eating disorder, so now help me define who I will be. And it's like, whoa, wait, like, you don't know that, I don't know that, we don't know that right now. That's part of what we have to kind of wait for and explore.
Yeah. And I think especially depending on when in life you struggle as well, because I mean, I think if the onset of an eating disorder is when you're very young, then all of a sudden, if you're dealing with it and finally you're in a place where you are getting intensive care, where you're in a residential treatment program, and now you're 20, 21, 22 years old, and you're like, this is all I've known since I was 6 or 12. And how difficult that is.
Absolutely.
I mean, sorry, I'm just like, I mean, I know how difficult it was for me. I can only speak from my own experience and friends that I know. And I started to struggle when I was 12, and I know many other young women who started to struggle at the same time. And I had to reconfigure my entire life because I thought I was going to be a ballet dancer. I mean, that was the only identity I had. Thankfully, I had a really great support system, and in my family and friends, and even many people in the ballet world who are very supportive of me, exploring other things. But it took me a long time. I mean, basically, I just turned 30. Woohoo! And I mean, it really took me like my whole decades of my 20s. I mean, I think from the time I was 19 and won Miss America, and then that put my whole life on another trajectory that I'm like, is this my identity? Well, no, it's not my identity. That it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it is a journey. I mean, we're constantly on a journey of trying to figure out who we are, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the scary and exciting thing about self-image and this identity journey is that we get to change. We don't have to stay the same. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, and I hope 5 years from now I'm not the same way I am right now. I hope I continue to grow and evolve and change in ways that align with my values and things that are meaningful to me, and that is going to change over time. So I think in some sense that can give us hope that just because maybe we were one way yesterday doesn't mean we have to be that way today or moving forward. And that is also scary too. But the cool thing is, like, how can we start to see our own sense of empowerment in that, where I also get to choose, who do I want to be? What aspects of myself do I want to grow? Where do I want to learn? Where do I want to get better? And how do I want to practice those things every day? So I think it can be scary thinking about the journey and where do I want to go. I have a lot of people I work with who are like, well, I don't know what I want to be or what I want to do. And so it's like, okay, well, let's talk about what you want to do today. Is there something you want to accomplish or get done today? And we can start there. Like, what is important to you right now? And let's accomplish something or set a goal that we can do today that's going to maybe help you get to long-term goals or to help you figure out what your long-term goals are.
Yeah, I love that. It's like taking it 10 minutes at a time.
Yes.
You know, like you might not know what you want in 20 years, but what do you want in the next 10 minutes?
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, oh gosh, you had this amazing sentence and it made me think of something that I wanted to ask you and now I'm forgetting. So I'll go back to my list of questions and then if I remember it, I'll come back to it. So let's talk a little bit about grieving the loss of the old identity when finding a new one. How important, we talked a little bit about validation. What does, like, is there a real grieving process when we say goodbye to the old self? And Denise, when talking about letting go of that identity, she says she started when she was 11 years old. I am now 45 and finally in recovery, which is amazing. Like, Denise, you go girl, like that's incredible. And I'm so happy for you. What does that grieving process look like? And does that mean I shouldn't say getting rid of, but maybe evaluating certain relationships in life, certain circumstances or jobs or living environment or things? It kind of requires some changes, doesn't it, if you're going to move on from an old identity and create a new one?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think the grieving process can look like our, typical 5 stages of grief. So it can include denial, anger, depression, bargaining. I think especially bargaining. So like, is there a little piece of my eating disorder identity that I can still hold on to? And so that can be a really tricky one to try to navigate. But it's okay to be mad about it. It's okay to be upset. Like, I don't want to lose this part of me. Maybe others have always seen me this way. And so is that something that I'm really struggling emotionally to let go of, even if logically I know I need to? But yeah, it is also acknowledging, and how is this not working for me? How is my eating disorder or this identity really hindering my life? Is it making it harder for me to even have relationships with other people? Is it making it hard for me to enjoy a meal with my kids or to enjoy a vacation because I'm so consumed with body image or eating disorder behaviors? So I think really looking at both sides of it. What am I grieving? What am I sad about? And also, what am I losing by staying this way?
Yeah. And I did remember what you said. And I said, oh, that's what I wanted to ask about. And it's about values because you talked about living life according to your values.
Yeah.
Which I love. But at the same time, it can be hard to know what our values are, especially early on in the recovery process. How do you, is it the same process when you try to help someone discover maybe what they want to do in the next 10 minutes that you apply to helping someone to discover what their values really are?
Yeah, that is actually one of the things I do in one of my ED groups is I help the residents to identify their values. And it's really interesting that it may seem challenging. And I think it would be if you just had a piece of paper and I said, okay, Kristen, write down your top 10 values. If you're in early stages of recovery, that's going to be really hard to do. But I give them like 4 or 5 pages of words. And so then they can go through and circle the values that are important to me. And I think there's values lists all over the internet. So this is something anybody could easily do. Just print off a list of values, circle what's important to you, and then start to kind of decide from there, like, am I actually connected to these values or not? Like, if family is important to me, how much time am I spending with my family? Maybe that's something I could change today. Can I call somebody in my family today who I haven't maybe talked to in a while because I've been so isolated or consumed with my eating disorder? So that is a small change that we can make to help us align with values. And I also encourage people to identify what their eating disorder values have been. So has it been the perfection, the control? And so really starting to see, what does my life look like when I'm living by my eating disorder values? And what can it look like if I really connect to what's truly important to me?
And is it also like imputed values? Because I feel like there's a sense of, well, the world tells me I should value this, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're good things, but maybe they're not things that are as important, right? Because we can't have like, I know that the kind of person that I am, I would look at it 4 pages of values and be like, start circling all of them.
Yeah.
Know, be like, oh, well, I value all these things. All these
Right.
things are my values. Well, I can't have 500 values. You know,
Right.
you don't have that much time in life,
Exactly.
and so you have to prioritize, which
Mm-hmm.
can be very hard for a sensitive person, which means, well, maybe if I prioritize this value over this one, this means I'm disappointing these people, or I have to be confrontational with these people, and it's very, very hard. So how do it's this process of like, how do you make sure we're not imputing values from the world or what other people tell me my values should be, but making sure they really are ones that I believe in?
Yeah, and I do usually encourage residents to also write down, like, is this a societal value? So as I'm going through my list, can I like star ones that are really important to me to help actually maybe come up with a top 10 rather than a top 500. But then can I write like family by maybe ones that are super important to my family, and maybe they are still important to me, but not quite as important as they are to my family, or society, that society thinks this is really important. And I sometimes get caught up in that too. And when I take a step back and look at it, that's not actually like a top 10 value of mine. It's just something that, like, a pressure that I feel. And that, I think, helps us to differentiate what is my self-worth rather than what is society's definition of worth for me.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So good. So let's talk about 2 more things that I think are really, really key in this discussion. The next one is that in like finding and developing and creating a new identity and a new sense of self-worth, how do we make sure that we're not placing our sense of identity or self-worth in something that is, and I hesitate to say like not good, but like, okay, the eating disorder is one identity. And then let's say, okay, well, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to get a PhD in mathematics, and I'm going to be the best mathematician at Yale University, and I'm going to go and write 5 books and have a TED Talk. And, like, and that those are all good things. And that's all things that the world would say are really, really good. But we don't want to replace one. And the only word I can think of to use in this, like one idol with another, like obviously that's faith language. So I don't want that to turn anyone off, but like, creating one like house of cards, like the eating disorder, that this is going to give me all my worth and value, to another created identity that if it doesn't work out, or, you're a triathlete and you get in a car crash and become a paraplegic, that doesn't work out, that your whole world doesn't fall to pieces again.
Right. And that's where balance really is the key with identity, and kind of exploring, who am I? Who do I want to be? So, yeah, absolutely. Go to school, get your PhD in mathematics, and also think about how you're spending your time. Like, am I just focusing on school to where I have no social life, or I don't do anything for fun? No, instead, how do I find balance with that? I can go to school, earn my PhD, and still have a social life. So a little bit of it is like, how am I looking at the balance of everything in my life, and seeing myself through all of those different roles, rather than, I am just this like mathematician person and that's my only identity. Maybe I'm a dog lover too. And so, like, how do I wear multiple hats and spend time with all of those things? Because I think that's where it could get easy. Like, nope, I've just got to focus on school. So I don't have time for a dog. I don't have time for anybody else. And if those are things that are really important to me, I need to stay connected to it. So, and I think going back to values, if we can identify top 10 values, yeah, maybe like a career is one of my top 10, or education is, and I have 9 others. So how can I also spend time with those 9 other things and not just my top value?
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay and Sarah, I see your questions and I'm going to get to them in just 1 second. Okay. With Camille. So balance is good. Let's talk about a super, super practical thing here. Okay. So we are using social media, so we're not going to like totally bash social media, because it can be used for a lot of really good things. But
Absolutely.
in our pre-conversation, we talked about like the power of cleaning house, so to speak, on social media, and how that can be a big part of developing a sense of self-worth. What would you encourage people who are watching or maybe in recovery? How should they handle your social media accounts?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it absolutely can be used for good. So it is, how are you using social media? So who are you following? So think about, like, if you open Facebook or Instagram right now, what's going to show up and how are those things going to make you feel? So if a fitness model is going to show up when I open my Instagram and that is going to make me feel terrible about myself or make me feel like I need to go to the gym for hours today, that's not going to be good for my self-worth. And I could still value going to the gym for 45 minutes today. There's nothing wrong with that. And can I do it out of self-love, not out of self-hate, compared to what I just saw on my social media? And so I really want people to think about, when I'm opening Instagram or Facebook, what am I looking at and how is it making me feel? Because I know I follow, well, and I mean, you can probably relate to this too. I follow a lot of dogs. So when I open Instagram, I see these cute puppies or funny dog videos, and it just makes me smile. It brightens my day, just like Elsa.
I know, it brightens my day too, Camille. I know. There's really nothing like animal videos for like stress relief.
Absolutely. So I think finding those things are really important. For anybody with an eating disorder. Because yeah, sure, you can find tons of, I mean, obviously the internet's filled with like pro Anna and Mia stuff out there. And it's really sad. And we don't have to choose to follow it. We can choose to follow puppies or nature. So what am I seeing and how is it making me feel?
Yeah, I think that reflection is so important. And you know what's interesting is I just updated my phone I have an iPhone, and you know, whenever they release the new phones, there's always a software update with the phone you presently have. So I did, and one of the new features on it is that you can set time limits for apps.
Oh.
So that you can set a screen time. You can say, okay, with this app, I'm only going to spend 45 minutes a day or something. And you can set an app, it'll give you a notification, or it'll automatically shut the app down when your time limit is reached.
Wow.
Obviously, we're all adults here, so you can go in, and if you really wanted, you could then go and change it. But it's kind of self-regulating tool, and I thought, that is really, really a great idea.
That is. I think it just helps build self-awareness, because I think you're right. I don't think we're always totally aware of how much time we're spending or how these things are really making us feel. Like maybe I think, you know, looking at like posts of other people or other things or diets are like not affecting me, and they probably are. I'm probably just not in tune with it or aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to, okay, I'm going to take Sarah and Lindsay's questions, and then I'm going to ask you my last one. So Sarah says, Sarah Glover says, I'm 2 months out of treatment and I'm refeeding and restoring weight still, but being brave and seeing life as good and joyful is worth the work. So I guess it's not really a question, but super, super cool. Way to go, Sarah. That's amazing.
Absolutely. That's really powerful. And because, yeah, obviously if somebody's body is going to be changing in their recovery process, that makes that identity stuff really challenging too. And so that's incredible. That's really hard work to do that process. And I think it is helpful to, like Sarah mentioned, see the good in your life. Because, yeah, if you're only focusing on the body that you're no longer, you know, having and starting to get used to your healing body or your recovery body, that if you're only focusing on body, it's going to be really hard to maintain that. But if I can start to see what other good is coming in my life, where are things getting so much better, then that can really keep somebody motivated, even through the challenge of the body image stuff that's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Really, really wise words. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. Lindsay has a great question. Sarah continues, says, I'm finally thinking about me without anorexia first. I'm living my true life every day and setting boundaries. Way to go.
Yay.
And replacing with joyful things. So awesome. I'm just smiling so much. Makes me so happy. So Lindsay has a question, and this is a Lindsay that said she's an alum of TK. She says, I have the logical mind from recovery, and I bring it back to wise mind, but I am glad I am restoring weight outside of treatment. but then I'm scared of creating a new me and I go back to the number. How does one bring the logical mind and values into life? And that's that bridge I think she's asking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, it's challenging because we can know what our values are. And I think it's how do I apply this? Like when the numbers or my eating disorder tries to show up and bring me back to what's familiar and what I've always known, this identity. It is how do I like stay true to what I'm trying to create? So I think it is really helpful to try to like stay connected to values. I often encourage people like write down your top 5, put them on a little Post-it or a little note card that you can carry in your pocket or in your purse. And do I need to pull them out and remind myself, or just even check in with how can I make a choice that's value-based right now, even if my eating disorder is showing up and trying to tell me to make a different choice. So what value do I want to connect with in this moment? I think is one way to try to like, especially in the heat of the moment when emotions are maybe running high, how can I try to reconnect to a value that's actually going to serve me well in this moment? Yes, maybe my eating disorder would relieve the anxiety or the fear or the sadness that I'm feeling right now, and what's actually going to help me function or have an effective life. So what value do I want to connect with right now?
Yeah, really, really wise words. Okay, so last thing I want to talk or ask you about briefly is, and we talked about this before, it was, okay, so what do we do when you're trying to develop a sense of self-worth and you're like, all right, these are my values. Got it. Prioritize them, have my stars around them, have them on my Post-it note. Got it. All right, I'm feeling good about myself. I'm feeling confident. I'm finding joy and stuff. Then I screw up. And it could be in relation to the eating disorder. It could be a relapse. It could be a binge. It could be a skipped meal, or it could be something completely completely unrelated to eating disorder behavior at all. It could be like, I totally yelled at that person in the grocery store who cut in front of me or whatever and had a hissy fit and treated them like crap. Or I, had an argument with my mom or dad or a close family member and I lost my temper and I said something I shouldn't have said. Or I had an argument with my boyfriend or girlfriend, or, something else that you do that doesn't align with your values and you messed up. Now, for me, there was a time in my life to be like, oh, okay, screw all that work with the self-worth. See, I'm really a horrible person. There's like, I shouldn't have believed all that self-worth garbage. I'm a horrible person. See, all this self-hatred that I was believing was right. How do we acknowledge that, okay, yes, I did something wrong, and yet still maintain a sense of self-worth?
Yeah, and I think that's where I really like Kristen Neff's work around self-compassion, because one of her principles of self-compassion is to acknowledge common humanity, or to acknowledge that we're human. And so that means that I'm flawed, that I make mistakes, and so it would be okay if anybody else made a mistake. So can it also be okay for me to make a mistake? And part of that is seeing that I'm human, that I'm not this like super being that doesn't make any mistakes. I do struggle. I do make mistakes. It's going to happen. And so can I see myself as human, and not have these really high expectations that I be perfect, because then that's going to lead me right back to that eating disorder perfectionism, of I have to do it all right all the time, and then I'm going to have all this pressure on me. So instead, can we allow ourselves to make mistakes? Because then I think you're right. If I can allow myself to be human, then I can make a mistake and get back on track in recovery. Whereas if I'm saying I'm not allowed to make mistakes, I'm not allowed to be human, when I make one mistake, it's all going to be over.
Yeah. And there is a difference between guilt or feeling remorse or, oh, I wish I couldn't have done that. Or I know that wasn't me meeting up to what my values are, right? A sense of guilt and then shame, right?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
can have one, but you don't have to have both, or you should have one and not the other, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all going to have both. And I think it's really ideal if we can start to turn shame into guilt. So rather than making a mistake and thinking, I'm bad, I'm a terrible person, can it turn into, I made a mistake, I feel bad about it, I don't want to make that mistake. but I am still worthy. I am still a human that deserves happiness and deserves good things. And I made a mistake. That it's the both and. It's not that a mistake means I'm no longer worthy. So yeah, I think we do want to try to like let go of some of that shame if we're starting to feel that, and kind of transform it more into guilt. And I know Brene Brown talks a lot about that. And so she acknowledges too that like everybody's going to have shame. Like that again is another human experience. We all feel it. And in order to work through it, we really need to be able to acknowledge that we're human, that we make mistakes, and move forward from it. But shame is going to keep us stuck, and we're not going to be able to move from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so daily practice. This takes daily practice, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the more you do in terms of self-compassion or identity work, and the more you connect to your values, the better you're going to start to feel, the more you're going to understand who you are. So it's not something that we can neglect. And I think, unfortunately, in eating disorder, you know, if somebody's struggling with an eating disorder, you probably have to work a little bit harder than the average person who doesn't have that struggle. So you're maybe going to have to put in a little bit more work, or at least be a little bit more intentional about it. Because if you have all that like judgment and criticism showing up for you, naturally, you're going to have to do some work to create something new rather than just stay stuck in what your mind is typically giving you.
So good. I feel like I just took like a bubble bath.
A bubble bath in self-worth and compassion.
A bubble bath in illumination and wonderfulness. Camille, this has been so good, and you've stayed on much longer than I originally asked you to. So thank you so much for your wise words and your wisdom and your really good, very practical insight into how to develop this sense of self-worth and to maintain it. Was really incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was wonderful talking to you about this. It's an important topic, so we need to keep talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we'll have you back on again soon. Say hello to everyone at TK for me, please.
I will.
Give my love to all the women as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kirsten.
All right. Bye, Camille.
Bye.
So good. So that's the end of our show for today. I really hope that you were able to glean something from that and be inspired, get some hope, because I really love to break down what seem like very commonly discussed words or concepts in recovery, like self-worth, and yet it can be a struggle to figure out, well, how do I do that? What is the practical application in my life? And I feel like Camille just did such a wonderful job of breaking that down. And I especially love the last point about guilt and shame, and that we can understand that, yes, we're going to slip up. We're going to make mistakes. We are human. I know, novel concept, but that doesn't have to transition to a thought of, well, I am a horrible person or I am a bad person. That you can make mistakes and still be worthy and still be valid and still be valued and worthy of love and happiness and joy, just like she said. So Carrie says, so glad I was able to tune in. Yes, Carrie, thank you so much. Hey, Lindsay says, thank you, Camille, and Kirsten. Thank you, Lindsay, so much, and Sarah as well. Really inspirational stuff there. And Denise from South Africa, again, who joined us. Really great to see you here. So if this was, moving for you, or if there's someone that you know or love who is struggling, who you think this might be something that would be interesting or helpful to them, please go ahead and share it. It's going to be pinned to the top of our Facebook page, as well as available on our YouTube channel, the Eating Disorder Hope YouTube channel. And I know that Timberline Knowles is going to share it as well. So it's going to be all over the internet. So you can share it with whomever it might be helpful for. So to you, wherever you may be in the world, you are beautiful, you are valued, you are loved, you are cherished, you are worth it. But I cannot believe that for you. You must believe it yourself. So the rent is due every day, folks who need to wake up and daily practice self-compassion is completely worth it. So that's it for today's episode of Weekly Hope. We'll have another one back here on Wednesday. So check out the Facebook page to figure out who the guests are, the topic, and the time. But we would love to have you back. So have a wonderful night, and we will see you again soon. All right. Ciao.